comes trouble, people used to say. And who do you think would come walking along?
Uh-oh, here comes trouble.
That's right, Little Miss Trouble. Oh, goodness, the trouble she caused.
Goodbye.
One morning, she went to see Mr. Uppity.
Do you know what Mr. Small called you behind your back?
No? What does Mr. Small call me behind my back?
Well, Mr. Small says...
Yes, I see. Does he really call me that?
Now, Mr. Uppity didn't like that. Not at all. Not one little bit. He went immediately to find Mr. Small. Little Miss Trouble was thoroughly delighted with herself.
Oh, I do like making trouble. There's nothing like a spot of trouble to liven up the day.
Then, Little Miss Trouble went to see Mr. Clever.
Sir, do you know what Mr. Small calls you behind your back?
No, tell me, what does Mr. Small call me behind my back?
Well, Mr. Small says...
Really? Uh-huh. Oh, really? Does he really?
Now, Mr. Clever didn't like that very much either. So he rushed off to find Mr. Small. Little Miss Trouble was terribly pleased with herself.
Oh, I do like making trouble. It's no trouble at all, you see. It's easy as pie.
Then she went to see Mr. Worry.
Sir, do you know what Mr. Small calls you behind your back?
Oh? Tell me, what does Mr. Small say about me behind my back?
Well, Mr. Small says...
Oh, really? He does? I don't believe it.
Mr. Worry was furious. Off he worried to find Mr. Small. Little Miss Trouble was beside herself with glee.
Oh, I do like making lots of trouble. It's always so much fun for me.
Mr. Small was working in his candy store. He was busy stacking boxes of candy on the counter. Suddenly, the door flew open, and in rushed Mr. Uppity, followed very closely by Mr. Clever, followed even closer by Mr. Worry.
Look here. I want to have a word with you.
We want to see you. Yes, we want to see you right away.
Yes, I want to see you. I really want to see you.
Mr. Small almost jumped out of his skin. He took one step backwards and fell off the counter, bringing half of the boxes down on top of him. When Little Miss Trouble heard what had happened to poor Mr. Small, she chuckled to herself all the way home.
Oh, this is great. I just love it.
Poor Mr. Small arrived at the hospital in an ambulance and hobbled in to see the doctor.
Good heavens, man. Whatever happened to you?
Mr. Small told the doctor the whole story.
Oh, I think something should be done about that little lady. What she needs is, yes, that's it.
What is it?
Asked Mr. Small. Dr. Makewell whispered something in Mr. Small's ear. Would you like to know what he whispered? Well, I'm not telling you, because it's a secret. That afternoon, Mr. Small went to see Mr. Tickle.
Hey! Do you know what Miss Trouble calls you behind your back?
No. What does Miss Trouble call me behind my back?
Mr. Small paused for a moment.
Pudding face!
What?
Pudding face!
Then Mr. Small went over to Mr. Bump's house.
Oh, Mr. Bump!
Hello.
You know what Miss Trouble calls you behind your back?
No. What does Miss Trouble call me behind my back?
Mr. Nitwit!
What?
Mr. Nitwit!
Well, now, Little Miss Trouble herself was in trouble.
How dare you call me pudding face?
Said Mr. Tickle angrily. And he tickled her.
And how dare you call me a nitwit?
Said Mr. Bump. And he bumped her. Now, I don't know whether you've ever been tickled and bumped at the same time, but it's not much fun. In fact, it's no fun at all. Tickle bump, tickle bump, tickle bump, tickle bump, tickle bump, bump, bump. It went on for 10 minutes. And 10 minutes of tickle bumping is a long time, I can tell you that. Later that evening, Dr. Makewell strolled around to see how Mr. Small was doing.
Hello there, Mr. Small. How is your foot?
Oh, much better now, thank you.
And did our little plan work?
It did indeed, yes.
Shake.
Said Dr. Makewell. And they shook hands. Well, not quite hands. Dr. Makewell then strolled round to see Miss Trouble. She was feeling very, very sorry for herself.
Well, now. So what's the matter with you?
And she told him all about it. All about everything.
Oh, Mr. Small went around and told Mr. Tickle that I called him Pudding Face, and I didn't. Then Mr. Small told Mr. Bump that I called him Nitwit, and I didn't. And then Mr. Tickle and Mr. Bump came to me and went, tickle bump, tickle bump, tickle bump.
Oh, now, just cheer up. You know what you've just had, don't you?
Little Miss Trouble shook her head.
No, what?
A taste of your own medicine.
Sometimes in sunshine, sometimes in style, sometimes with no time or just with a smile. Up to her eyes in surprises and tricks, no disguising, she's a little handful of trouble, a bundle of fun. Glad you could make it, so glad you could come. Little Miss, we're waiting for you. Ready, steady, how do you do?
Welcome to Miseryland. I say welcome, but there really isn't much to welcome here. It's the most miserable place on earth. Miseryland worms look like this. And when the birds wake up in the morning, in Miseryland they don't sing. They just start crying, and they keep it up all day. Oh, I tell you, Miseryland is really the most terrible, awful place. And the king of Miseryland? He's even worse. He sits on his throne all day long in total misery.
Whoa. Oh, I'm so unhappy. Oh dear. Oh dear. Oh dear. Oh.
Now, Little Miss Sunshine had been on vacation. She had a lovely time and was now driving home. She was singing happily to herself as she drove along. Then, out of the corner of her eye, she saw a signpost. It said, "To Miseryland."
Miseryland? I never heard of that place before. I'll eat lunch there.
And she drove off down the lane marked "To Miseryland." After a while, she came to another much larger sign which read, "No smiling, no laughing, no chuckling, giggling forbidden by order of the king." Miss Sunshine was shocked.
Oh dear, oh dear.
She came to the door of the castle. A soldier held up his hand and stopped her.
What do you want here, young lady?
I want to see the king.
I'm warning you, laughter is not allowed here. Stop that giggling. All right, you're under arrest.
Ordered the soldier grimly.
What for? Why am I under arrest? I only just arrived in Miseryland.
You're under arrest for a most serious crime. Most serious indeed. Now then, you'll come with me at once. Do you hear?
The soldier sadly marched Little Miss Sunshine through the monstrous door and across a courtyard. And then they went through another huge door and walked up an enormous carpeted staircase. From there, they went along a long, long corridor and through another huge door and entered into a gigantic room. And at the end of this gigantic room sat the king. He was moaning and sighing as sad as could be.
Oh dear. Oh dear. Oh.
Your Highness, I have arrested this person for a very serious crime.
What crime?
Well, she smiled at me, Your Highness.
She did what?
She smiled at me.
But why on earth is smiling not allowed?
And And she's laughing at me too.
Why not?
She chuckled. She chuckled at me. She giggled too.
And the king burst into tears.
Oh, for heaven's sake, my goodness.
This sort of thing is just not allowed.
But why are all these things not allowed?
Because this is Misery Land, and they have never been allowed. Oh dear, oh dear, oh dear. Oh, I was so unhappy before you arrived, but now I'm twice as unhappy.
But wouldn't you really like to be happy?
Oh, of course I would. But how can I be? This is Misery Land.
Little Miss Sunshine thought for a moment.
Come with me.
You can't talk to me like that.
Don't be silly. Come on.
And she led him across the gigantic room and through the huge door to where her car was parked.
Get in.
She said. Little Miss Sunshine drove the crying king back to the large sign.
Dry your eyes.
She handed him a handkerchief from her handbag, then she produced a large pen. 5 minutes later, she was finished.
There. Now you can be happy. You are now entering Laughterland. Smiling, laughing, chuckling, giggling are permitted by order of the king.
But I don't know how to be happy. I've never tried it.
Oh, it's really very easy. Just do this.
She smiled a great big smile. Then the king tried to smile too.
That's not bad. Try this.
And she gave a little chuckle, and then the king tried to chuckle.
You're getting better.
Then she giggled. And then the king giggled.
You got it.
And then she laughed.
So I have. Yes. Now I'm the king of Laughterland.
As Little Miss Sunshine arrived home, there was Mr. Happy out for an evening stroll.
Hello. Where you been?
Miseryland.
Miseryland? I didn't know there was such a place.
Actually, there isn't.
Oh, I see.
Sometimes in sunshine, sometimes in style, sometimes with no time or just with a smile. Up to her eyes in surprises and tricks, no disguising. She's a little handful of trouble, a bundle of fun. Glad you could make it, so glad you could come. Little Miss, we're waiting for you. Ready, steady, how do you do?
Little Miss Scatterbrain was what you might describe as being just a little bit forgetful.
Yeah.
Little Miss Scatterbrain was more than just a little bit forgetful. One fine day, while out for a walk, she just happened to meet Mr. Funny.
Hello, Miss Scatterbrain.
Hello, Mr. Bump.
Miss Scatterbrain continued to walk and then met Mr. Slow.
Hello, Miss Scatterbrain.
Hello, Mr. Rush.
And then she met Mr. Tickle.
Hello, Miss Scatterbrain.
Hello, Mr. Strong.
And then Miss Scatterbrain went on and met Mr. Happy.
Hello, Miss Scatterbrain. Where you up to?
Miss Scatterbrain thought and thought.
I bet you've forgotten, haven't you?
Forgotten what?
There, I told you.
Absolutely, totally, completely, and so utterly forgetful, absent-minded.
Miss Scatterbrain lived in the middle of the woods in Buttercup Cottage. Everybody knew it was called Buttercup Cottage, except the owner. She kept forgetting. One morning, the mailman came along.
Ah, good morning. Do you know where Buttercup Cottage is?
Yes. Yes. I think it's down the lane. On the left. No, it's on the right. And it's the one with the little roses round the door. Oh, no. You go straight till the end of the road, and there's a left turn, but you don't go that way. You go to the right, and it's on your left. Yes, left. Uh-huh.
Thank you very much.
I know. To help me remember the name of my cottage, I think I'll put up a sign.
My, oh my. Just look at what that sign says. She isn't called Miss Scatterbrain for nothing now, is she? One winter morning, little Miss Scatterbrain got up and went downstairs to make herself some breakfast. She shook some cornflakes out of a box, but being such a scatterbrain, she forgot to put a bowl underneath.
Oh, silly me. Where'd I put the milk?
It took her 15 minutes to find it.
Oops, silly me.
After breakfast, little Miss Scatterbrain set off to town to go shopping. First, she went to the bank.
Good morning, Miss Scatterbrain, and how may we help you?
Good morning. I'd like some,
money.
sausages.
Sausages? But this isn't the butcher's. This is the bank.
Oh, silly me. I was forgetting. I do sometimes, you know.
Really?
I'd like 2, please.
Right.
Yes.
The bank manager passed $2 over the counter. Little Miss Scatterbrain slowly looked at them and said,
What are these?
$2.
They don't look much like sausages to me.
Well, eventually the bank manager managed to explain, and off went Miss Scatterbrain to the butcher.
Phew. That Miss Scatterbrain, she never knows what she wants. And she's nothing but trouble. She orders sausages from the bank. For crying.
Little Miss Scatterbrain walked down the busy street. She went into the butcher shop.
Good morning, ma'am.
Said Percy Pork the butcher.
Good afternoon, Mr. Beef.
Pork.
Sausages.
But my name isn't Sausages.
Of course not. That's what I'm here for.
Oh, what sort?
What do you suggest?
Beef.
I thought you said your name was Pork.
Percy Pork sighed a deep sigh.
Just call me, Percy.
Well, eventually, after a little more confusion, little Miss Scatterbrain managed to buy her 2 pounds of beef sausages, and Percy Pork wrapped them up for her.
Looks like snow.
He said, trying to make conversation while looking out of his shop window.
Oh? Really?
Said Miss Scatterbrain, looking at the brown paper parcel.
Looks like sausages to me. Snow, what a funny man.
Goodbye, Miss Scatterbrain.
Good night, Mr. Beef.
Miss Scatterbrain left the shop to catch the bus home. She stood behind Mr. Silly at the bus stop. Then along came Mr. Nosy, and he stood behind her and looked nosily at the package that she was holding.
Hello. Looks like sausages.
Oh?
Little Miss Scatterbrain looked up at the sky.
No. Looks more like snow to me.
Sometimes in sunshine, sometimes in style, sometimes with no time or just with a smile. Up to her eyes in surprises and tricks, no disguising. She's a little handful of trouble, a bundle of fun. Glad you could make it, so glad you could come. Little Miss, we're waiting for you. Ready, steady, how do you do?
Little Miss Helpful was one of those people who just loved to help other people.
Nice day for helping out.
You know what I mean? I mean, for instance, like the time when one of Mr. Tall's shoelaces came undone. Now, if you're as tall as Mr. Tall, tying your shoelaces isn't the easiest thing in the world, as you can imagine.
Let me help you.
Said little Miss Helpful, rushing up to where Mr. Tall stood, looking down at his shoelaces. But somehow she managed to tie Mr. Tall's shoelaces together. And then he teetered.
Hey!
And then he tottered. And then Mr. Tall fell right over. And if you're tall as Mr. Tall, falling over hurts.
Hey! Oh, my poor head!
Hey there, let me help you.
And she tried unsuccessfully to lift Mr. Tall again.
Come on, up you go. Up you go.
Little Miss Helpful puffed and struggled. Then she had an idea.
You're too tall. Don't go away, I'll be right back.
And off she went to find the wizard. He wasn't home, but looking through the window, she could see his book of spells on the table. She crept into the house and turned over the pages until she found the spell she was looking for.
Tall be small when I call small. Small be tall when I call tall. I think I can remember that.
And she hurried back to poor Mr. Tall. Looking up at him and waving the wizard's wand, she cried,
Tall be small when I call small.
My. Mr. Tall suddenly shrank in front of her very eyes.
It worked! It worked! The spell has worked!
Mr. Tall found it much easier to get to his feet again.
Thank you. Now, would you make me tall again, please?
Squeaked Mr. Tall. But as Miss Helpful was trying to remember the other half of the spell, who should come along but Mr. Small?
Mr. Small meet Mr. Tall.
Tall my foot, lady. Why, he's just as small as I am.
Oh, dear. Let me, hang on a second. I got it. Tall be small and small be tall. Oh, no. Hold on a sec. Small be tall and all that better be all. No, hold on a sec. Small be tall. No, small be tall when I call fall.
Well, yes, now you know what I mean about people like Miss Helpful. For instance, last year, Mr. Happy woke up not feeling very well. The doctor had to be called to Mr. Happy's house, which is on a hill by a lake.
Oh, dear.
Said the doctor when he saw Mr. Happy.
Looks like measles.
Mr. Happy's face fell.
Now, you're going to stay tucked up nice and warm in bed and get lots of rest. Take this medicine 3 times a day,
The doctor left the cottage and Mr. Happy settled down to sleep. He had just fallen asleep when there was a loud knock at his front door.
Oh, dear, oh,
Groaned Mr. Happy. Then he got up and opened the door.
Hello there. I've come to help.
But look,
But nothing. Now off to bed while I get on with everything.
Miss Helpful looked around the cottage.
This place needs a good cleaning.
Mr. Happy had just dropped off to sleep again when Miss Helpful poked her head in his bedroom door.
Hey there. You got a scrubbing brush?
oh, dear, oh.
Poor Mr. Happy. He had to get up and show her where it was. And then he went back to bed to try to sleep. Downstairs, Miss Helpful stepped back to admire the kitchen floor she had just scrubbed and slipped on the soap.
Oh,
And she fell head over heels and got her head stuck in the bucket. And because she couldn't see where she was going, she walked into a shelf full of pots and pans, which fell all over the floor with a terrible clatter. And because she couldn't see where she was going, little Miss Helpful stepped into a pot and got it stuck on her foot. And because she had to hop, she fell over against the refrigerator door, which fell open, and everything inside fell out all over little Miss Helpful. Poor Mr. Happy awoke with a jump at the terrible commotion.
Oh, what? Oh,
He groaned and got out of bed.
my goodness, oh, no.
He went to the kitchen and opened the door and couldn't believe his eyes. There in the middle of a pile of broken eggs and a scrubbing brush and rolling pots and pans and a lot of water, spilt milk, squashed butter, and a piece of soap, sat little Miss Helpful, with a bucket on her head and a gravy pot on her foot. Mr. Happy grabbed the bucket and pulled as hard as ever. And pulled and pulled. Pop! The bucket came off the top of Little Miss Helpful's head like a cork out of a champagne bottle. Mr. Happy shot backwards like a bullet from a snub-nosed .38. Crash! He went flying through the kitchen door and shot across the garden and straight through his garden hedge. And he rolled down the hilly field behind his garden, faster and faster. And splash! He landed in the lake. And there he sat with a bucket on his head. And a little figure with a gravy pot on one foot came running, actually half-hopping, out of Mr. Happy's house and down towards the lake.
Hey there, Mr. Happy. Can I help any?
Sometimes in sunshine, sometimes in style, sometimes with no time or just with a smile. Up to her eyes in surprises and tricks, no disguising, she's a little handful of trouble, a bundle of fun. Glad you could make it, so glad you could come. Little Miss, we're waiting for you. Ready, steady, how do you do?
Have you ever been naughty? I'll bet you have, once or twice. Well, Little Miss Naughty was naughty all the time. She awoke one Sunday morning, bright and early, and looked out of her window.
Looks like a nice day for being naughty.
Now, that particular Sunday, Mr. Uppity was out for his morning stroll.
I'm going to knock his hat off.
From behind a wall, Miss Naughty knocked Mr. Uppity's hat off his head with a walking stick.
My hat!
That same day, Mr. Greedy had put a turkey in the oven for lunch, a rather large turkey.
Sure beats eating a TV dinner. I'm going to steal it.
Oh, no. Who's that at the door just when I'm about to eat my delicious lunch? I'll answer it. Hello? Nobody's there. We're back to lunch. Oh, no! Oh!
Poor Mr. Greedy. A sausage isn't much of a lunch when you've been looking forward to a whole turkey, is it? And do you know what Miss Naughty did that evening? She went to an expensive restaurant and ordered all the most expensive food on the menu.
I'd like some oysters, caviar, fresh salmon, side order of fries, hold the slaw, T-bone steak, well done, cheesecake a la mode, and your best bottle of lemonade.
And then do you know what she did? She sent the bill to Mr. Mean. Naughty girl. What a shock. The next day, she met Mr. Worry.
Oh dear, oh dear, oh dear.
Oh, what is the problem?
Looks to me like you got measles. Your face looks like a pizza.
Oh, dear.
He worried off to see Dr. Makewell. Well, Dr. Makewell listened to Mr. Worry's tale and took a mirror from his desk.
Oh, there's no spots. What a thing to say to me when it wasn't true.
Oh, what a lovely day. And it isn't even dinner time yet.
The city council decided to hold a meeting.
Something has to be done,
announced Mr. Uppity, holding out his bent hat. And Mr. Greedy thought.
Yes,
He cleared his throat and spoke.
I forgot what I was going to say. Well, I know what the little lady needs, and I know who can do it.
Oh, really? Who?
Come on, let's have it. Oh, that would be telling then, wouldn't it?
Mr. Worry went to see a friend of his, someone who could do impossible things, like making himself invisible. Meanwhile, that afternoon, while Mr. Nosy was asleep under a tree, little Miss Naughty crept towards him with a pot of paint in one hand, a paintbrush in the other, and a large grin on her face.
I'm going to paint his nose red.
But just as she was about to do the dreadful deed, something happened. The brush jumped out of her hand. Then it dipped itself into the red paint and began to chase Miss Naughty down the road.
Oh, no! Stop! Help! Help!
Somebody was holding the pot and brush. I wonder who. Mr. Jelly was waiting for a bus all alone when, behind his back, little Miss Naughty crept up quietly. She had a balloon in one hand and a pin in the other. Oh, she couldn't do that to poor, nervous Mr. Jelly, could she? Of course she could.
He'll really jump when this balloon goes bang.
But just as she was about to make the balloon go bang, something happened. The balloon began to grow larger and larger as some invisible person blew air into it. Slowly, Miss Naughty began to lift off the ground.
Help! Help! Put me down! Put me down! Put me down!
She sailed away, up and over the trees, may have sailed on forever if the balloon hadn't finally burst. Poor Miss Naughty, she fell into a duck pond. The next day, Mr. Lazy was in bed fast asleep. Outside his house, little Miss Naughty stood by the front door. She raised her hand. Uh-oh, she couldn't be so naughty as to knock on that door and wake up poor Mr. Lazy. Not at 6 o'clock in the morning. She couldn't. Oh, yes, she could.
Oh, won't it make him angry waking him up this early?
But just before she did, guess what? That naughty girl felt someone who was invisible tweak her nose hard.
Oh, ouch! Oh, ouch! Oh, stop it! It'll get off! It's not fair!
And little Miss Naughty ran home holding her nose. After that, she was cured. No more naughtiness at all. The next day, Mr. Worry went to thank his invisible friend.
Good morning, Mr. Impossible. Thank you very much for helping me to cure poor little Miss Naughty of naughtiness.
My pleasure. But it did take a week.
Yes, indeed. And a tweak?
Sometimes in sunshine, sometimes in style, sometimes with no time or just with a smile. Up to her eyes in surprises and tricks, no disguising. She's a little handful of trouble, a bundle of fun. Glad you could make it, so glad you could come. Little Miss, we're waiting for you. Ready, steady, how do you do?
Little Miss Tiny was extremely small. She was not very tall at all. She was so very tiny that she didn't even live in a house. Do you know where she lived? In a mouse hole, in the dining room of a farmhouse. She had made the mouse hole quite comfortable, really, and luckily there weren't any mice because Ginger, the big farm cat, had chased them all away. Now, the trouble was, because she was so tiny, nobody even knew she lived there. Nobody noticed her, not even the farmer and his wife. She didn't even get junk mail from supermarkets. So there she lived, all alone, and she was lonely and sad.
I wish I had someone to talk to.
One day she was feeling so lonely, she decided to be very brave and go for a walk.
Okay, Tiny, best foot forward.
Out of her mouse hole she came. She crept across the dining room and went through the crack in the door and into the hall. To little Miss Tiny, the hall looked as big as a football field.
Oh, my goodness!
And she scurried across it to the back door of the farmhouse. Luckily for her, the cat flap at the bottom of the door was open, and she squeezed herself through it and out onto the doorstep. It was all very exciting. There before her was the vast expanse of the farmyard, so she set out to explore it. As little Miss Tiny walked across the yard, she came upon a hole. Suddenly, out popped a worm.
Morning. See any birds around?
Oh my goodness, it's a monster!
Little Miss Tiny was terrified. She ran across the farmyard to hide, and she came to a door with a gap at the bottom and ducked in underneath. There inside was someone snorting and breathing very heavily. It was a pig, a large pig. And if you're as small as little Miss Tiny is, a pig looks very large indeed. Miss Tiny looked at the pig, and the pig looked at Miss Tiny. The pig grunted and moved closer to inspect the little person who had entered the sty.
Oh my goodness, mercy!
And Miss Tiny shot out of the pigsty as fast as her little legs could carry her, which wasn't very fast because her legs were so small. She stopped to catch her breath.
Oh my goodness, I can't stop the knocking of my knees! Oh.
When she recovered her breath, she climbed up on a large stone to see if the pig had followed her. Fortunately, it hadn't.
Thank goodness for that!
But suddenly, the stone began to move.
Oh no, for heaven's sakes, what's happening now?
Hey, you! Get off my back!
It was only a harmless old snail. Little Miss Tiny jumped down and ran across the farmyard. She ran around to the back of the pigsty before she stopped. She leaned against the wall and put her hands over her eyes. Suddenly, she heard a noise, a very close sort of noise, a sort of licking noise, which sounded an awful lot like broken windshield wipers, which scared her even more. She hardly dared to take her hands away from her eyes, but when she did, she wished she hadn't. What do you think it was? There, right in front of her, looking at her with green eyes, was Ginger. Not the Snaps, but the farm cat. Poor little Miss Tiny. Ginger grinned from ear to ear and showed Miss Tiny her sharp white teeth.
Help! Oh, somebody please help me!
Well, it looked like curtains for little Miss Tiny. She shouted at the top of her voice. The trouble was, the top of her voice was not very loud. Ginger grinned another grin. Every day, Mr. Strong went out to gather some eggs. He loved eggs, lots of them. That day, he was walking back across the farmyard when he heard a very tiny squeak. At first, he thought he had stepped on a cricket. But then there it was again. It was coming from around the corner. He looked around the corner and saw Ginger and little Miss Tiny.
Help, please help me.
So come on now, scram, little cat.
Mr. Strong gently picked up little Miss Tiny, very gently.
Hello, who are you?
I'm Miss Tiny.
You really are, aren't you? Well, if I was as tiny as you, I wouldn't go wandering around large farmyards.
But I'm so lonely, I wanted to find somebody to talk to.
I understand. Well, let's see if we can't find you some friends to talk to.
Thank you very much. That's very kind of you.
And now, every day, Mr. Strong collects little Miss Tiny and takes her off to see her friends. 3 days ago, he took her to see Mr. Funny, who told her so many jokes she just couldn't stop laughing all day. 2 days ago, he took her to see Mr. Greedy. Mr. Greedy told her his special recipe for his favorite breakfast.
Toast, 2 slices, cornflakes, 1 whole box, milk, 1 bottle, sugar, 1 bowl, ham, 3 slices, eggs, 4, boiled of course, or soft, 10 sausages, butter 1 pound, marmalade 1 pot, and a box of cupcakes.
But that's too much for tiny little me. I couldn't possibly eat all of that.
Well, for you, divide by 100.
Yesterday, Mr. Strong took her to see Mr. Silly. And while they were there, Mr. Silly showed her how you stand on your head.
That's very silly.
Oh, yes. Thank you.
And guess who she met today? Someone who's become a special little friend, Mr. Small.
I never thought I'd ever meet anybody smaller than myself.
Just you wait till grow up.
Very good. Very good. Oh, that's really good. Very good.